The man who trains the shadows. The air in the Black Haven was colder than usual that night. Even the lights seemed to dim on their own, as if the shadows were listening. Annie slept quietly in a small room lined with steel walls, but Frank couldn't. The Raven had been gone for 3 days, and something about the silence felt wrong. Too heavy, too alive. He stepped into the main corridor, the floor echoing beneath his bare feet. The torches flickered, whispering against the metal walls. Suddenly, a voice echoed. Deep, calm, and cold. "You shouldn't walk alone here, Frank." Frank turned, and there he was. The Raven, dressed in black from head to toe, face half hidden behind a steel mask, eyes burning like 2 dying embers. But tonight, something was different. His voice carried weight, the kind that came from surviving 100 deaths and still not being sure he was alive. "Where were you?" Frank asked, almost whispering. Raven turned his gaze toward the flickering light. "In the place where heroes die before the world ever knows they lived." Frank frowned, unsure whether to ask more, but Raven stepped closer. "You want to uncover your father's truth, don't you?" "Yes," Frank said firmly. "I'll do anything." Raven's eyes narrowed behind the mask. "Then you should know who trained him." That night, in the heart of the underground compound, Raven opened a door Frank had never seen before. It led to a chamber filled with strange artifacts, broken weapons, old military insignias, torn maps, and photographs burned at the edges. "This," Raven said, "is where the story of heroes that never existed begins." Frank walked around the relics. One stood out, a blood-stained photograph of Raven standing beside his father. Both looked younger, alive, smiling. "You knew him," Frank whispered. "I trained him," Raven replied, "and I buried him with my own hands." The words hit Frank like a blade to the chest. Raven sat on an iron chair, the room dimmed by one weak bulb swinging above. "You see, Frank, we were not soldiers. We were ghosts. The government needed shadows, men who could do what light could never allow." His voice grew softer, almost human. "I taught your father everything. How to disappear, how to lie, how to kill without hatred. But I failed to teach him one thing." "What?" Frank asked. Raven's mask turned slightly. "How to survive his conscience." A long silence followed. Then Raven stood, removing his gloves. Beneath them were hands covered in scars and burns, as if he had walked through fire more than once. "I've trained many," he continued. "Some became heroes, some became monsters. I can't tell the difference anymore. Every hero I made died before the world ever learned their names." He walked to a black chest in the corner and unlocked it. Inside were old journals, each marked with a name. Dozens of them. Every one belonged to someone who had once been a hidden national hero. Frank's breath trembled. "They all died?" Raven nodded. "They paid the price. You will too." A faint sound came from the corridor, a whispering, like 100 voices echoing at once. Frank turned, heart pounding. The shadows in the hallway seemed to move, twist, breathe. "Don't be afraid," Raven said quietly. "They're the memories of those who never left. Their souls are bound to this place, to remind me what failure looks like." The air grew colder. Frank could swear he saw faint silhouettes, outlines of soldiers standing silently watching him. "They were my students," Raven whispered. "And they still train me in my nightmares." For the first time, Raven removed his mask. His face was wrong. Half of it was scarred, melted, burned by something chemical or explosive. but the other half looked young, almost untouched by time. Frank stepped back in shock. "I'm not what I used to be," Raven said calmly. "I'm what I had to become to protect this nation, to keep men like your father alive." Tears welled up in Frank's eyes. "Why did you save us?" Raven turned away, his shadow stretching long against the wall. "Because your father saved me once, when I didn't deserve to live. I promised him I'd protect you both, and make you stronger than he ever was." Then Raven did something Frank didn't expect. He kneeled. "From this day forward," he said, "you are my student. But understand this, Frank. I don't train heroes. I train survivors." The bulb above flickered violently, casting long streaks of light and shadow across the room. For a moment Frank could see the faces of the fallen behind Raven, watching him, whispering, waiting. And when Raven looked up again, his voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "Welcome to the shadows, Frank Maccury, the same shadows that raised your father and buried him." The room went dark. The mind that must break, the Black Haven slept, but Frank did not. He hadn't slept in days. Ever since Raven showed him the faces of the fallen, their hollow eyes haunted every second of his silence. He heard them whisper in the walls, in his dreams, in the darkness. Tonight, Raven said, would be his first true training. Frank stood in the circular chamber known only as the Mirror Room. The walls were lined with black glass, not transparent but reflective, bending his image into distorted versions of himself. Dozens of Franks stared back at him, older, younger, broken, angry. Raven's voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once. A man cannot defeat his enemies until he defeats the war inside him. Suddenly, the lights went out. Frank's heartbeat filled the void. Then, a blinding flash. The mirrors lit up again, but now they were alive. Each reflection moved on its own. One cried, one screamed, one laughed, all at once. The laughter was the worst. It sounded like his father's voice twisted into madness. "Stop it!" Frank shouted. Raven's voice cut through the noise, low and sharp. "Face it! Don't run! What you see is what you've buried." The glass began to melt into visions. Frank saw his childhood home, warm lights, his mother smiling, his father's shadow behind her. Then, a gunshot. Blood on gold. Annie screaming. His mother falling. The world collapsed into silence again. Frank dropped to his knees, trembling. "I can't." "You can," Raven's voice echoed. "You must. The world doesn't care about your pain, Frank. It will use it against you unless you own it." Suddenly a hand gripped his shoulder. Raven stood behind him, silent as death. "Pain is a door. Walk through it." Raven pulled a small device from his coat, a silver disc glowing faint blue. He pressed it to Frank's temple. For a second, everything went white. Frank gasped. He was somewhere else. The walls were gone. The air was cold. He stood in the middle of a burning city. Sirens, screams, explosions in the distance. "Where am I?" he shouted. Raven's voice came from the sky. "Inside your own fear." Figures began appearing around him, tall, faceless, black as smoke. They whispered his name. "Frank, Frank, you failed them." He tried to run, but every turn led to the same street, the same fire, the same burning face of his father, reaching for him, then fading into ash. Frank fell, clutching his head. "Stop! Please!" But Raven's tone was merciless. "Heroes are not born in light. They are forged in terror. Frank screamed. The ground cracked beneath him, and then silence. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the mirror room. Sweat drenched his body. He could barely breathe. Raven stood before him, holding a timer. 3 hours. You survived 3 hours inside your own mind. Frank blinked. 3 hours? It felt like days. That's the point, Raven said. Time breaks differently when fear is real. Frank looked at his reflection, but now it was just him. One face, one will, one purpose. Raven stepped closer, his voice softer now. Your father lasted 2 hours the first time. Frank froze. He did this too? Raven nodded. Every hidden hero begins with the same trial, but only a few return. As Raven walked away, he said one last thing, his voice echoing like thunder through the hollow halls. Your mind is your strongest weapon, Frank, but only if you learn to bleed with it. Frank stared into the black mirror, blood still dripping from his nose, heart pounding with something new. Not fear, not pain, power. The darkness no longer scared him. It obeyed him. The next phase of his training had begun, the discipline of shadows. The next morning, the Black Haven felt different. The silence that once felt suffocating now sounded like breathing, steady, calm, alive. Frank stood before a long mirror again, bruises across his arms, dried blood beneath his nose. But his eyes, they were no longer afraid. Raven watched from the corner of the room, hands clasped behind his back. His mask reflected the faint light of the chamber. You survived your own fear, Frank. But surviving isn't enough. Now, you must learn to control it. Frank looked up, his voice rough. How do I control something that lives inside me? Raven turned, walking slowly toward a table covered in black stones and chess pieces. You don't silence fear. You discipline it. You turn it into thought, into calculation. Every great warrior is part monster, part monk. He placed a single chess piece in front of Frank. The king. Your father was brilliant, but reckless. He let emotion guide his blade. You will not make that mistake. From that day the training changed. No more hallucinations or pain. Now came silence, patience, and strategy. Every morning before the lights rose, Frank sat cross-legged in the cold corridor while Raven's voice echoed in the dark. Count your breath. Feel your heartbeat. Learn to stop it for 3 seconds. At first, Frank failed. His heart would race, his breath shake. But he kept trying. Days became weeks. The tremble faded. The stillness came naturally. Then began the labyrinth trials, mental simulations where Frank was placed in illusionary missions. Each scenario was built to test his mind, not his muscle. Sometimes he had to choose between saving Annie or completing a mission. Sometimes he had to watch his own failure again and again until he learned to detach emotion from decision. It broke him. And then it rebuilt him. One night, after hours of training, Fran sat beside the underground stream that ran through the haven, the only sound of peace in that steel tomb. His reflection rippled on the water. He whispered to himself, I'm changing. I can feel it. From behind, Raven's voice answered quietly, You're not changing, Frank. You're remembering who you truly are. Frank turned. What do you mean? Raven knelt beside him. The mask shimmered under the dim light. Your father once told me that the Maccury bloodline carries something rare, a sense of duty stronger than survival. It's what made him great, and what destroyed him. Frank stared into the water again. Then I'll be better than him. Raven's tone softened, rare, almost fatherly. You already are. You just don't know it yet. Weeks passed. Raven began teaching Frank the strategy of silence, how to read people without words, how to control his pulse during interrogation, how to remain invisible in plain sight. One test left Frank in a room with a live grenade and a timer. He was told nothing, only to observe. Frank disarmed it in 40 seconds, not with panic, but with clarity. Raven simply nodded. Your father took 65. That night, alone in his quarters, Frank touched the small photograph of Annie he kept hidden in his boot. Her smile reminded him of light, the only thing he refused to let die inside him. He whispered, "For you, Annie. For him. For all of them." In the Black Haven, strength wasn't about lifting weights or winning fights. It was about mastering silence, mastering pain, and learning when not to move. Raven's final lesson that month came with only one sentence. He stood before Frank and said, "A man who feels everything dies fast. A man who feels nothing dies forgotten. But the one who controls when to feel lives forever." Frank didn't reply. He didn't need to. His eyes said it all. The boy who once trembled was gone. In his place stood a mind sharpened like a blade, cold, precise, unbreakable. The Raven walked away, whispering to himself, "He's ready. The shadows have accepted him." But far beyond the Black Haven, in a world unaware of the storm building, below, dark forces were already moving again. Whispers of the fallen syndicate resurfaced, the same organization that once hunted Frank's father. And this time, their eyes were on Frank Maccury. The whisper in the wires. In the heart of the Black Haven, there were doors Frank never entered, rooms where light never touched metal, where silence was thicker than air. One of those doors now stood open. Behind it, a soft blue glow pulsed against the walls, dozens of monitors flickering with encrypted codes, satellite feeds, and nameless files. And in the center, sitting quietly with headphones around her neck, was Annie Maccury. She was only 10, but her eyes, steady, sharp, unblinking, held the calm of someone who understood more than she should. Raven had noticed it long ago. She sees patterns where others see chaos. While Frank trained his body and mind under torment, Annie's world was different, quiet, digital, invisible. Her mentor wasn't Raven directly, but an unseen voice known only as Cypher, a figure whose face no one had ever seen. Cypher communicated through distorted audio, teaching her the art of observation, code, and communication warfare. "Every secret has a pulse, Annie," Cypher's voice hummed from the speakers. "Your job is to listen until it skips a beat." Annie's tiny fingers danced across the holographic keyboard. Strings of encrypted data scrolled by, faster than human eyes could follow. She was tracing a digital ghost, a hidden transmission sent years ago by her father. "Project HNH," she whispered. "Hidden national heroes." For days, she decoded fragments, phrases that made no sense alone but formed something haunting when combined. "If they find me, tell Raven. The syndicate is alive." The device must stay buried beneath the Black Haven. The words chilled her. She turned to the old monitor where her father's encrypted voice echoed faintly through static, recorded years before his death. "Annie, if you're hearing this, then the walls have fallen. Trust Raven. Trust no one else. Not even the light." She froze. Heard the pounding. Her father had left a message hidden inside the very system Raven used. That night, while Frank meditated in the training hall, Annie snuck through the network tunnels, narrow, cold passageways lined with fiber cables that buzzed faintly with power. Her flashlight flickered over strange symbols carved into the concrete, a pattern she'd seen in her father's old journals. She touched them gently. "Dad, what were you hiding down here?" At the end of the tunnel, she found a sealed hatch marked with a small golden insignia, the same insignia her father used on his cufflinks. Her pulse quickened. As she approached, the hatch's biometric scanner lit up. A soft mechanical voice spoke. "Maccury genetic match confirmed." The door unlocked. Inside lay an old chamber, filled with outdated computers, dusty journals, and a single flickering hologram projector. When it powered on, a figure appeared, tall, in a long coat, his face hidden in shadows. "Hello, Annie," the hologram said. "If you found this place, then you've inherited more than just a name." Her eyes widened. "Who are you?" The figure smiled faintly. "A friend of your father, and maybe one day your enemy." The hologram flickered, then displayed a map, full of red points scattered across the globe. "These are the resting places of those who once fought beside your father. The hidden national heroes are not gone, Annie. They're waiting." Before she could say another word, the projector shut down, the room plunging into darkness. Back in her quarters, Annie sat quietly, processing everything. She didn't tell Raven. She didn't even tell Frank. Her mind was racing, decoding, remembering, connecting threads no one else could see. From the corridor, Raven watched her silently. He didn't interfere. He knew exactly what she was doing, and that she was meant to find it. Under his breath, he murmured, "So, the daughter awakens." The next morning, Annie returned to her terminal. Her screen flashed a message from Cypher, but this time it wasn't code. It was a warning. "They know you accessed the archive. The syndicate has reactivated. Stay silent. Stay unseen." Annie's eyes narrowed, steady as steel. "Let them come," she whispered. "They'll never see me, but I'll see everything." For the first time, her reflection on the monitor didn't look like a child's. It looked like a shadow. While Frank was being forged into the body of a hero, Annie was becoming the mind, the unseen intelligence behind the war to come. And somewhere deep beneath the Black Haven, the device her father spoke of, the one he said must stay buried, began to blink softly, for the first time in years,